This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. There's a certain kind of exhaustion that makes even your favourite book feel incredibly heavy in your hands. When you open it, the words blur together and your mind drifts off, and you start to wonder if you've forgotten how to read and if you've lost your love of reading altogether. For many of us, reading isn't just a hobby, it's how we make sense of the world, and it's fundamentally who we are. So when books stop working, it feels like losing part of ourselves. Now, sometimes the best solution is to stop trying to force it and to take a break from reading, or resort to employing alternative forms of reading methods such as consuming audiobooks exclusively for a while, or just listening to podcasts and radio shows. But if you're still feeling burned out and in a desperate need to get back into reading, let's talk about books that may help you rekindle your reading spark. Now, burnout isn't a trendy label. It's a stress-related condition that develops as a result of prolonged psychosocial stress exposure, primarily due to a mismatch between demands and resources. The main symptom is emotional exhaustion, but it can also manifest as physical fatigue, diminished professional efficiency, distress, low self-esteem, hopelessness, helplessness, cynicism, and cognitive impairments. At the worst point, burnout makes it impossible to do basic things. You can't enjoy the things that you used to enjoy, and reading in particular completely evaporates. Now, what books can help you in the midst of a burnout will be entirely down to personal preference, as your mind is uniquely yours. What you find relaxing or soothing or what speaks to your soul will be unique to your circumstances, tastes, and personal history. So as such, to help you pick the right books, I've identified 4 categories for the types of books that you may want to look into. And of course, with each of these categories, I will give my own personal recommendations. But again, they're just examples of the types of books that you may want to try reading. I've listed them all down below, and all of them feature affiliate links. So you may not want to use my links, but if you do, it helps me out. So thank you very much. So the first category focuses on gently reintroducing yourself to the act of reading. When you're burned out, you may find it difficult to do basic things like feed or bathe yourself, so the idea of sitting down with a huge, challenging text is the last thing on your mind. To get the most nourishment out of literature and to take your burned out brain away from the non-satiating yet addictive junk food adjacent media consumption that it resorts to, you need to start small. So these texts in this category are those that are short and low pressure and should hopefully inspire serenity, comfort and self-compassion that you really need at this time. Now, the best books that fit this category are short story collections, essays and poetry anthologies, of which you may already have some that you'd like to turn to. But if you're completely out of ideas, here are some of my recommendations. In this video, by the way, I am bringing in my physical copies, but some of them they're really buried deep. This library is double stacked very intensely with stacks on top of stacks, and I was scared to move certain books in case it just toppled everything over. And I wasn't prepared for it. So here are some of the books physically, but I'll put all on the screen. But before I go into the categories, I'd like to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, which is Squarespace. Whether you're just starting out or managing a growing brand, Squarespace makes it really easy to create a beautiful website, engage with your audience, and sell anything from products to content to time, all in one place and all on your terms. I've gone through many iterations online, from blogging to running a business, and Squarespace has seen all versions of my online evolution. One avenue I've always considered going into is running a workshop course series, and I can actually host all of that on my Squarespace website because it would allow for members-only content for my community, where I could sell access to online courses or blogs or videos and memberships, and purchases can be anything from a one-time fee to a subscription access. And when it comes to evolving my business, I can make smarter business decisions with Squarespace's intuitive built-in analytics tools, which allows me to review my website traffic and learn where to focus my engagement and track revenue from bookings, invoices and product sales all in one place. So if you're interested, check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and then when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Lady of the Library to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. The first is Change Your Life by Rainer Maria Rilke. Now, this is kind of a glorified title. Don't get your hopes up that it's a self-help poetry collection by any means. However, Rilke is one of the most lyrically intense and philosophical German language poets there has been. His poems give a profound expression to the fundamental questions of love and death and of the chaos of the modern world. There's a real gentleness and lightness to Rilke's poetry that makes him incredibly easy to digest but still incredibly satiating. I feel like he handles the reader very delicately and attentively, and considering he was a writer in very dark times, one who was considered an antidote to the world in 1932, he's pretty relevant now as he was then. One of my favourite lines from his poetry includes, quote, "Let everything happen to you, the beauty and the terror. Simply keep going, no feeling is too impossibly far. Do not set a gulf between us. They call it life, the land that lies close. You will know it, and you will understand by its seriousness. Now, give me your hand." The next is one of my personal favourite collections, and it's the collected poems of Audre Lorde. I say this all the time about Lorde, who will feature more than once in this video, that no matter if you're reading her poetry or her essays, you feel as though this woman is in the room with you. If you ever feel lonely or isolated, she'll be there when you start reading, and I can't quite understand how she has constructed her writing voice in such a way, but it's quite magic. Now, naturally, a lot of her poems deal with incredibly heavy subjects, but despite that, I always come away from her writing feeling grateful that a voice like hers exists and does so much for this world. She has a ferocity and confidence that's quietly powerful and infectious. And much like Rilke, there's a real delicacy to her writing that forces you to exist within her text as you read it. Now, for short stories, I always return to Labyrinths by Jorge Luis Borges and the complete stories of Clarice Lispector, of whose copy I can't find. All my other Clarice Lispector books are together and I don't know where I've put it. I clearly have wandered off with it somewhere. And also, what can I say? South American writers really know how to write short stories. Now, both of these writers are mythical in their style, and they sort of compose concoctions of surrealism and cruelty of the human mind that transcend the boundaries of literature. It's surreal, but also significantly poignant. And there's a beauty in them that if you don't have the energy, really, for your brain to fully dissect what they're writing about, you still feel like it was enriched in some way, and they can always return to it quite easily, because mine are littered with notes, as you can see. And finally, for essay collections. Now, obviously, I'm a huge fan of this publisher, so I can't not recommend everything by the publisher Fitzcarraldo. They have an extensive range of essay collections, all of which have this iconic white front cover. And two of the recommendations I would give is This Young Monster by Charlie Fox, which I'm naming this one because it's bizarre. It's a surrealist phantasmagoria celebrating queerness and artists who raise hell, effectively, transform their bodies and anger their elders and show their audience dark and disturbing things. And the other essayist I would recommend is Annie Ernaux. There are many collections of hers. The one I would go back to in a burnout is I Remain in Darkness, which is an exploration of the complexities of watching one losing their mother to Alzheimer's and dealing with the grief that comes with that. It's quite heavy. You shouldn't be coming to me if you want, cheery, cozy fantasy recommendations. I'm not that kind of reader, I'm afraid. Most of the books I recommend are incredibly dark, but hopefully significant. Now, the second category of books that I would recommend you read in a burnout are those that incite feelings of nostalgia, which, again, will be completely unique to you. It's basically any book that you can conjure up that would equate to being the literary equivalent of soup and a warm blanket by the fire. So for many of you, this may be a childhood favourite, like Little Women, The Hobbit, His Dark Materials, or The Secret Garden, but you may be more like me and find comfort from books that you read later in life. Now, again, this is obviously subjective for everyone, but were I to give my two recommendations for books that bring up nostalgia, they would be David Copperfield by Charles Dickens and basically anything by Daphne du Maurier. Now, unfortunately, this isn't really an area where I can give many recommendations, and you also may struggle here too. It's not the same for everyone, but if you're similar to me, when you're in the depths of a dark place mentally as well as suffering from burnout, it's really hard to recall any positive feelings at all, let alone feelings of comfort that you once gained from a book. So it can be hard to recall what texts fit into the category of nostalgia inducing. As you can see, I struggled too. I don't have anything really to say, which is why I hope the extended version of this type of video may help those who, like me, aren't in a place where nostalgia and comfort can touch them, let alone aid them. Now, the third category I've come up with is quiet nonfiction. This is nonfiction that is more about nature and art and thought rather than the productivity, self-improvement, or heavier subjects like that. You'll also note that I avoided any book that is directly about burnout, whether that's philosophical or self-helpy. Because personally, for me, after years of reading those types of books, hoping to find an answer, I didn't find any, and that can leave people feeling rather hopeless, as it did to me. So for this category, this type of reading aims to distance you from the feeling of needing to fix yourself and your relationship with reading, because these kind of books don't demand anything from you. They simply remind you that wonder still exists, even when you're too tired to chase it. The first book I'll recommend in this area is The Orphic Voice by Elizabeth Sewell. It's not an easy read, so again, keep that in mind, but it's an example of incredibly eccentric scholarship, and it's a glorious example, though, of philosophy meeting heavier theory. You see, her text maps the relationship between poetry and natural history, linking poets like Goethe and Shakespeare to scientists like Francis Bacon. So poetry is sort of her methodology, and then she uses nature, or rather biology specifically, to examine its own mythology. And it's called The Voice of Orpheus because Orpheus is, quote, poetry and myth and post-logic thinking about itself, is not subject to interpretation by other disciplines. He is himself interpretation, the specific instrument of the poet's researchers. Another recommendation in this field is my favourite, Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde. I've waxed lyrical a lot about this text over the past few years for the same reason I spoke of her poetry. After I finish reading her work, I always feel quite lonely, but in a good way. It feels like this, wonderful inspirational presence has just sort of walked out the room and left you with sort of only particles of her knowledge and aura. But you can always get her back by reading her again. But again, how she's done this to feel physically present in the room is a mystery to me. Another book I'd recommend as well is How to Live a Life of Montaigne, which is by Sarah Bakewell. Bakewell is a really enjoyable biographer of philosophers who distills very complex characters and histories and philosophical concepts into pretty fascinating, enjoyable reads that are neither too patronising nor too alienating. This book specifically deals with not only Montaigne's life and work, but explores his work within the ideological contexts such as Stoicism and Epicureanism and Skepticism. And she works through the questions that he did, which was how to live a life, like how does one live amidst loss and violence and love and other people. And it's quite an easy self-help related book, which is more intuitive with literature again, which I find it inspiring to read other philosophers after reading her work. And the final category is pretty nice and easy. For me, anyway, it's sort of the safest category to venture into because I never really feel that I read the wrong text for this. And this category is to read about books that remind you why you read. So it depends again on what makes you feel more energized during a burnout, if you want to take action or if you want to sort of escape and relax a little bit into a nostalgia. If you want more action, then I recommend a book such as How to Read Now by Elaine Castillo, which explores the politics and ethics of reading, particularly highlighting to readers how to think critically about distorted histories or colonially imposed narratives in literature which continue to be perpetuated and endorsed due to a lack of critical engagement with these texts and the systems which continue to uphold these narratives. If you want something a little bit leaning towards self-helpy, You Are What You Read by Robert Diani is a practical guide on how we can increase the benefits and pleasures of literature by becoming more skillful and engaged as readers. And if you want something a little bit more nostalgia, a little bit more old school, then I recommend Why Read the Classics by Italo Calvino, which is a seminal text exploring what makes a classic, from their ability to be reread continuously with new meaning to inviting criticism and commentary. He examines how many of the classics earned their title and how this genre of literature was even born. And then if you want something a little bit more fragmented in terms of easier to consume, then A Reader on Reading by Alberto Rangel. This text is actually 39 essays exploring the crafts of reading and writing, but most significantly, how certain books and stories become repositories of personal memories for the reader, and how we as readers are in a symbiotic relationship with the texts we consume. Thank you ever so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you have any requests for future videos, either on me exploring particular texts or philosophical concepts, or ideas that you want me to explore in a literary philosophical way, please let me know. I have a Google form down below where you can put your submissions in. But thank you as always for watching, and in particular thank you to my wonderful Patreons, and particularly my librarians. We have Lacey Grindstaff, Joshua Heredia, Gil the Gilded Dragon, Fox Goblin 666, Lady of the Labyrinth, Ellen, Eric Taylor, Yvonne and Yvonne, Jenny Edivane, Marina, Wee Lauren, Nicholas Reed and Andrea Bazil. Thank you all so much for your continued support over on Patreon, and for all of you watching today's video and liking and commenting and sharing. It means so much to me. And as always, I hope you are happy and healthy, and remember, books save lives. So keep reading.